Welcome to the Intentional Creator Podcast, where we explore what it takes to truly thrive as a creator making a positive impact in the world. I'm Lisa Boreen Miller, artist, designer, and brand and communication strategist. I help creators and changemakers find the words and visuals to share their calling with clarity and courage. I believe that creators are powerful agents of change, and my mission is to support your journey with inspiring content on the podcast, as well as through my courses, workshops, and programs, so that you can make the positive impact that you are meant to. Today, I'd like to welcome Christine Francoeur to the podcast. The majority of Christine's career was in loyalty marketing, advertising, and business development, working with top retailers in Canada and the US. A crushing diagnosis of breast cancer at 33 came with messages she wasn't ready to hear. Discovering and redefining her version of success and fulfillment, she opened and listened to what her heart really wanted: a family and opportunities to coach people who are inspired and ready for change and growth. Through study, certification, and practice in coach training, yoga philosophy, and insight meditation, Christine now sees mindfulness has been the foundation to support her for a purposeful life. This transformation fuels her passion to speak at events, teach, and coach others in helping them discover what that is in their lives. Hi, Christine. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad I get to spend some time with you today. This is
I'm
good.
so glad too. I'm so glad to have you here for the podcast. And we're going to be talking about writing today, which I think is a shared love for both of us.
Yes, I'm excited. Close to my heart. And anytime anyone wants to talk about writing, I am always there for it.
I love that. So before we kind of get into the writing and how you found this love of writing, could you tell us a little bit about just your background and what you're up to now, and maybe weave in how writing maybe plays a bit of a role?
Sure. Um, well, right now, I actually work for a company called Shadow Light Global. You'll find us online. It's actually Shadow Light Consulting. We haven't transitioned, but we are basically a leadership development company. We do a lot of change and transformation through like coaching, and we actually have a coaching school, so people can actually come and train with us to be coaches. And it's been a really long journey for me to get here to actually be answering this call, which was to be of service. So it's actually a great fit for me because I'm, able to bring some of my marketing expertise, which partners with my love of writing and my creativity, along with this other side of myself, which is really to help people transform and find the answer to really what their heart calls for them. So that's, I think, well, how we met, because from my coaching and some of my offerings, and a mutual friend, I think she told you about me. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to now. But when I think, to answer your question, when I think back historically, writing was always a big love of mine. I think it really developed in high school, like in the typical like English 10, 20, 30, where, I got to express in different ways. And I had this really brilliant teacher, and he was English and so proper. And I would always just laugh because I would listen to him in class, like insult other people on their writing in this proper British accent. And it would just make me like cringe, where I'd be like, okay, I better step up my writing. I better bring my best. But it was like always just that passion to express myself like through words in like really creative ways has always just brought me like so much joy. And that joy of creativity actually evolved into my career in marketing and advertising, and finding that space and why I loved it so much, because I was able just to answer the call of creativity. So
What I love about your response and your story is how you're weaving in these different passions. And one of the things that we often talk about with creators is how we're multi-passionate, but our skills are very transferable. So sometimes we find that we use our skills in these ways that um, we were never really expecting to. For example, maybe landing in marketing. You had this passion for writing and you maybe didn't know that marketing was going to be a career path. And then once you were in that world of marketing, maybe you can talk a little bit about what it was like to recognize that um, it was satisfying to use those skills, but then kind of what happened to the writing bit? Was there a shift where you thought, this isn't quite the direction? Because you've moved out of that quite a bit now into coaching, right?
Mhm. Yeah, when I think back on that, like I thought my career was going to point me more into like psychology, social work. Like I really thought, and I took a gap year. And so I ended up taking a job working for Canada Safeway in their corporate head office. And it was there that they just started offering me a really great opportunity to go to school part time. I ended up in the marketing group. And what's interesting about that, like when you think about marketing and the breadth of marketing, writing and those skills like really became more business driven. And I could feel my writing taking on a professional voice that was needed and wanted for what I was doing, but wasn't really answering like the creativity because always what I loved the most was like fiction. That throughout my whole childhood, like I asked my mom, I wanted to read. That was all I wanted to do. So I was like 5 and she taught me how to read. And she has pictures of me in bed with books stacked beside me, just like can't wait to read. And so that love of reading translated into this love of fiction and writing fiction. And so when I was in my career, I could feel like the waves of creativity want to come through in different ways. But it at that point, I was so junior, I was like a coordinator and I didn't really have that influence that I was looking for. So that's actually when I started searching out opportunities at the university through like creative writing or like finding writers groups and different ways that I could continue to actually foster my love of like writing fiction and just exploring that while still, weaving in different ways that the creativity could come in. But that wasn't until like really a lot later in my career.
So what did work at that time? Did you found some courses? Did they help you kind of nurture
Oh,
that love or get back into it? What was that like?
absolutely. Because, there's this real part of me then that I didn't know how to bring that creativity of me up and into my work where I would just let my right brain logic like override that. Like I could feel like the creativity like starting to come up and it would almost be like, it's like I'm here, hi, I have something to say. And it's like, no, you need to like pipe down. It's like it has to have more of a professional like interpretation. Like there's no room for that here, and there's probably some messages like along the way when I would bring ideas or different things where, that started to happen. And then it was like slowly that just got pushed down. So it was almost like I had to find ways to allow myself that gift of creativity outside of like my traditional role. And like being amongst writers, like there's no greater gift than to like share your writing, to have others share, to like, watch it grow and evolve. And yeah, like I have some really fun memories and some really great, teachers that I think back on that time and with how impactful it was for me to be in those spaces. And then life happens and then I just let it go. Let it go.
I think a lot of people can connect with what you're saying. One of the things I've been thinking about is how creativity needs space and time. And I think when, we're really busy with our career or raising kids or all of these other kind of life demands,
Mhm.
um, it feels really difficult to sort of say, okay, I'll be creative on Friday evenings from 7 to 9 or something.
Yes.
Uh, how did that look for you? Like, what did it look like when you were have you found that your creativity needed that time and space? And what does it look like as you kind of moved? Because just to add to that, I think I find that when I'm in that creative zone, it requires a different way of thinking. And so, like you said, well, my right brain was just always taking over. So I feel like that part of the time is giving the brain all this space to allow it to sort of speak to you a little bit louder, let the whispers get louder, and then take action on the whispers. And yeah, so what are your thoughts on how you could or how somebody else might try to start making that space?
Yeah, there's like a few things for me around that because as a coach, like when I think about what I said, which was like, I let it go. Like it was like, I just even bring my curiosity to that. And I think about that time. It's like, well, why did I let it go? Was it my career? Was it a lack of time? And if I think back on that, yes, it was that. But there was also a time there where someone like who was leading one of the writer groups I was in was really hard on my writing, like really a hard critiquer. And it turned something in me that I was like, maybe I'm not meant to do this. I started second guessing. And so then I wouldn't make the time and I would let other things come in. And it's like you said, there was no space because I already had maybe a bit of this belief that it wasn't good enough. That my writing wasn't good enough, or really, why put that time to it if it's not? And so I was completely ignoring like what was really calling for me, which was this joy and this flow and just the happiness of being in a story, creating someone who's having an experience that I could just dive into and be there for a little while and see what that character has to say or learn or grow. And so I think, time can be that universal um, thing that we're always searching for more and more in space. And yet, I think sometimes it's almost like coming into the honesty of what's underneath that, what might actually be blocking us from actually taking the time or doing it, or feeling like, well, if I don't have a perfect scenario to do this, then I'm not going to bother. And like I recently did a workshop and 10 minutes to write something. And I actually have it with me, what I created. And it was like, and Lisa, it was like 10 minutes. And I created this. It was like a prompt and I did it. And it felt like the light go on again. It was like, oh, well, it doesn't have to be like an hour and it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be my hands like at the keyboard and an idea like emerges. And then you just sit back and you go, "Oh, look, like this there, or maybe there's not, but it just felt like so good." So I don't know if that answers
Yeah,
like
it does.
fully, but
I think that's a beautiful answer. I like, again, so many of the things you said, I think are so valuable to dive into. And one is, I think so many people can connect with, myself included, the idea that a strong critical voice can just shut it all down. And I had something really similar in my art practice, a review that I found very difficult. And I think it was hard to step back into it again. And it doesn't matter if 99% of the voices are positive sometimes, right? One voice that we will focus on
mm,
and allow it to kind of tear us down.
yeah.
Uh, and I think the other thing that you said is, well, that I'm just kind of noticing is there's something really beautiful that happens when the pressure comes off the outcome and it's about the process again. And I think that is so freeing because, now you're really focused on coaching as your career. So writing, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not your primary career at this point. There's
Mm,
aspects you still use, but now the creative writing has this space to kind of be what it is. And now I hear you saying that you're in the flow when you're writing, that it's about the process. It's not about a perfect outcome. It's about you in your creative zone, uh, inspiration and connection. And I think that honestly, what you said about losing yourself in stories is probably why so many of us lose ourselves in Netflix
mm.
and enter this
Mhm.
other world. But when you allow your creativity to be that other world, it's just so nourishing.
It is. It is. And I think the whole process of releasing the audience, it's like, how do we do what needs doing when, we see this block and we can't get past it, yet we know we need to deliver on something. And so we talked about the invitation to actually show up and just start where there's no audience, there's nothing to like revise, there's nothing to fix. It's like, what if you could free up the audience and free up yourself through just this pure creativity of flow? In this conversation, I could feel the freedom of that for myself, not just in my creative writing, but at work too. It's like if I'm able to actually create this space more for myself, am I able to create more freedom for myself in other areas of my life by releasing the expectations that we create? Like we're always so much harder on ourselves than others, like it's that, how do I give myself this gift of something that I love so very much without expectation, like just freedom to create. And it sounds elusive, but it's just that step. It's that step into 10 minutes or, it's just, hey, nobody's here right now. Or if you just like went and sat down at my computer, like what could I do in 20 minutes? Like a lot, you know?
Yeah.
Like really? Like when you start to experience that, it's like, okay, here it is. Here it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed about you, Christine, is how you're such a natural coach and I know that from our work together, but also just when I hear you talk about anything, you're able to sort of see what's in the way, where are we going, and sort of bring this beautiful language to your coaching as well. And
Mhm.
I know that we've talked a little bit in the past about how writing a story for a client, especially maybe if they've been in your coaching program and they now need to launch their business. One of the areas I think we talked about that's common actually to both of our clients is that there's a need to now tell the story. And maybe in this case, it takes on the form of an about page or a
Mm.
homepage and an about page on a website. And what do you find happens for clients at that point?
Oh, to me, there isn't like sweeter work. I'm working with a couple people right now who are literally in that discovery. Um, they're bringing a new offering out into the world, creating this website, and we are starting with about me. And we just took off all the boundaries. We removed the audience. It was like, if you were to write your about me in a way that allows all of life to come up into the page, like all of it, like the hurts, the joys, the wisdom that it could be here. What would you say? What would you really say? And it was all the things that have come out in these sessions. It's like, and the change even in themselves, in their knowing. So we started so wide. And then it's like, okay, well, if we were to bring this down to three things that you could say, this is actually, if I look at my life, what do I know? Like these three things that you could take it into bite sizes in your about page, the essence of you. It's like, okay, it's these three things. And then we would come back the next week and it's like, actually, it's now. And I'm like, yes. Oh, I can, you can even come in with this. Oh, well, I think I know. And then it's like, I'm just goosebump talking about that because all of the truth that comes out in that discovery and through me bringing my curiosity. Oh, mm, those are sweet sessions. I just love them. So, yeah,
What would be the question that you would start with if somebody was about to write? Like, how would you open it up? Would it be those, what are the three things you know for sure? Or where do you have people start to reflect?
I actually start with like, can you start through the description of some of what you would be or what you would consider the most key events in your life and how they've contributed to who you are. And so we'll like start there. And yeah, fascinating. Find just like the things that maybe they thought was actually the learning or the wisdom that actually, when we peel back and we go in a little bit more, it's actually something completely different.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yes, it's like we think about our about page like here, then when we actually start going in, it's like it's down here. And to me, the authenticity of the about page really informs the whole messaging and content of the whole site and what and how someone shows up. Like it's like what you talk about, like the essence of the person can actually come through so that the person who arrives at the site says, oh, that's true for me too.
Yes.
It's those truths like coming out of the stories of ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I feel like there's this. I think it comes down to a lot of trust when somebody feels you're being authentic, and it's an energy that comes through the words as well, right? And if somebody shows up and they feel held by who you are, um, I think that that bodes well for forming a relationship.
It absolutely does. Yes.
Yeah. And where do you find that people are, and I kind of have a suspicion about what you're going to say, but I think it'd be useful for people to hear. Where do you think people go wrong in telling their story? Like before you do this work, because I know that many people that show up to me, for example, um, have written and rewritten things, or they've relied on maybe really professional credentials to basically just fill up that page. So, what are the types of things that you see going wrong before people dive into this work?
Well, it's like, again, what I was saying, like where I think we can start our about us in a way that has assumptions built in,
Okay.
or we might make assumptions about what we think our audience wants from us too.
Mhm.
And that can actually shape like our own story because we start writing for them.
Mm.
Like, it's like, this is what I think people want to hear from me.
Right.
And then we start constructing the story on a belief of something that we believe is external to ourselves, which, like to your point, is like, where's the authenticity
Right.
when we're really creating to someone else's needs versus like our own truth?
Right.
And, a big part of my story is I had breast cancer, when I was 33. And the learning is and the wisdom and all that comes from that. And absolutely, that is part of me, but that's actually not the story. My story is actually how I've learned to manage my anxiety, how I've learned to manage my fears, how I've learned to actually deal with the certainty of like mortality and what it means to actually live a life through choice and not just a response to what, again, others want from me, but what I want for myself. Like, so that to me is my story. The breast cancer is like an event, but actually, really the outcome of what happened as a result of that and my learnings of like who I am now is really the story of me. So, when I think about where it can go wrong, I mean, I could just write, well, I had breast cancer and like all the things around that, like the fear. And of course, all of that is totally relevant. But really, to me, it's like, well, actually, who I am now is my story.
I think that's very powerful, Christine, because I think you're so often we give our power to an event, like you said, right? And then it's this event that has caused this, this, and this. But I like how you're really taking ownership of your soul growth and all of the transformation that you are responsible for on your own journey, and that breast cancer was the catalyst. And I think that's such a big shift in thinking for people. And I think that's going to help a lot of people to approach this kind of work very differently. And then I think there's these different roles for writing. So the type of writing that we're talking about now is, in a way, rewriting your story. And I think that's really important and powerful work. And it's not, we talk about an about page. An about page, people just think, oh, this is just something I'm doing for my website. But actually, what you're describing and what I think you've witnessed and I've witnessed clients before is that the journey of doing that rewriting is actually deeply personal and transformational as we reimagine and relook at and retell, the events of our past, many of them which may have been very difficult.
Mm. It's true because when I think about this story, like my story, like around breast cancer, and I think what's universal in my story is I had a belief around um, what I had to do in this life in order to be successful, in order to feel fulfilled, and what that looked like. And that meant like a successful career, like a good salary. I would have a family. I would, you know, marry an amazing guy. Like I had this whole vision of what I believed, that to be. And then when something comes in like that, it it flipped everything to say, well, what was I believing about myself? Well, I was believing that I was defined by a career, that my value and my worth was immediately tied to the output in the work and the title that I had. And I was driving this for myself when that wasn't actually who I was at all. And it took me years to really unravel that, to know that my pushing myself so hard outside of what I was called to do actually resulted in me getting sick. And I knew that was true. And yet, I mean, the story could just be, well, I had breast cancer and then I was able to make proper choices, live a healthier life. Blah, blah, blah. But actually, it was like unraveling my identity and what I believed in the truth of me. And so that to me is the story, right? The truth of ourselves and like what we're here to do and our purpose and our calling and our intention, like how we align to the heart of what really is like the most important part of who we are. And hopefully that's like, that's the story that when people come to read about me, they're like, oh yeah, I can feel a bit of that too. Like, and what is that truth for someone else that they can look at their own selves and say, oh, yeah, they need to understand that better for me too. And that's why now coaching, that's why I became a mindfulness meditation teacher and a yoga teacher, because it wasn't just what, I was telling myself from the head up. It's that full embodiment of our truth. And so that's where coaching and the mindfulness to me all just link up to help us really understand that for ourselves through our stories.
I think I think that what you said about, you touched on kind of that universal nature of the essence of your story, which is coming to terms with who we truly are and letting go of all of these false ideals that we may hold for ourselves. And, in your case, it was breast cancer and likely other things as well that, led you down these paths. And um, for many people, I think the most when I meet with clients, typically, many of them come in at that point as well, at a point of where there's been a lot of loss or transition or change, and now there's a calling that needs to be shared because they're in touch with this truth, like you're describing.
Mhm.
One thing I'm noticing about your story is, um, how it's really important that you show up. We talked about authenticity and how you share that because we can't, and I know you know this, but I'm just explaining for others that we can't really expect our clients to go deeper than we go. So, in order to guide somebody on their journey, we have to be willing to go there. And you've just described how you've gone there, and now you're this safe container for others. And can be really frightening for people to realize that now, wait a minute, this is like the most painful. Like I feel raw, I feel exposed. I've let go of all of these ego sort of ideals that I had for my life, and you want me to put it out there in the world and tell everybody like how naked I am. But that's what's required, really, isn't it?
It is. It is because when we do that, we stop hiding. It's that feeling of the layers that we've built up in front of ourselves to protect ourselves. And yet it's like and I just think about those layers, it's just like you can just feel the light dim, when that happens, when we're just pushing it down, we're not letting it out. And, you know, like I'll share, like for me, it was like a bumpy road. Like I had my breast cancer diagnosis. I had to wake up. I was like, okay, I'm going to become a yoga teacher and I'm going to do these things. But I was like, oh, but I really shouldn't give up my career totally, should I? Oh, I'll just go and I'll work at an advertising agency, but I'll take a lesser role. But in the meantime, I'm going to do my coach certification and I'll do my yoga teacher training. I'm just going to dip my toes in over there while I'm still like, s- so yeah, see, I'm still doing both. And then every day I would go to the agency, like, and I would have this like tightness, like right here. I'm pointing to my like heart center. And I would go for gyro and I would go for massage and I would there be at my desk and it was just like, oh, why can't I just like, what is that? And it would just not go away. It was just like this dull ache right at my heart. And it, it was really me looking back and saying, okay, so I've had breast cancer. I lost my twin boys to an early preterm delivery. I have all this grief. And I knew what I was doing. I was consciously choosing to layer up because it was too hard to face like what was here, which was the fact that I still wanted to have another family. It wasn't really happening. And I had to really come face to face to say, like, am I going to quit? Like, am I going to really quit my job? Like, go against all my values of hard work and I can do this and I'm strong and I'm really going to quit my job. And I have this amazing husband who's like, why are you not quitting? And I was like, well, I don't quit. Um, don't you realize that would make me a quitter? Like, I don't quit. And so it was literally me coming face to face with that to say, all right, I'm going to quit. I'm going to heal myself and hopefully I will have a family. And I finished work in October. And by the end of December, I was pregnant with my daughter, Elle.
Sorry, Christine, just makes me emotional. It's a beautiful
Oh,
story.
yeah. So I just share that it's like there can be a balance. It's like, can we show up fully vulnerable? It's like the path. It's like sometimes we gotta dip our toes in and be like, okay, well, what can I take right now? What can I do right now to support myself? And then maybe there will be that point for the people listening here too, where it's like, okay, like what is my truth? What do I really need now?
Yeah, that's a very powerful share. You're really good at making me cry.
Likewise, now this is a heart connection.
um, yeah, I think once you're on that path, I mean, I think there's no ending, is there? Because I think that's the other illusion that we might carry is, okay, I've done the work.
Mhm.
and I showed up to my calling and I put it in the world and now pick it. Or and
Yes.
now there is this momentum. Do I really need to keep pushing this ball? Because shouldn't it be enough? We work
Yes.
so hard and overcome so much. Shouldn't it now just be easy?
Yeah.
And sometimes I guess there's these moments of ease. So what does it look like unpacking that on their journeys? What does that look like?
It's different for everyone because sometimes when we're pushing so hard, we might be pushing the wrong thing.
Mhm.
It can be this belief like I had that I was on a path and, well, I almost didn't know to look there and say, well, is this really the right path?
Yeah.
Because it answers these things. I'm being creative. I'm working with amazing people. And then on the other side, I was working at an advertising agency and Coca-Cola was my client. And I was a breast cancer survivor and I don't drink Coke. And I would never recommend people drink Coke. And yet I was selling Coke. And I was like inherently going against my values of what I believe was good health. And so it's like talk about pushing the balls, right? And thinking, trying to override like the fact that I was completely misaligned. And it wasn't until like I really was like that honesty to have with ourselves, like what you're talking about, where, yeah, I've been working so hard. But, if we're working that hard, are we focusing on the right things? And sometimes I think we need to just get really curious about that and say, well, if I'm putting all this attention here, is it the right kind of attention? Is it the right project? Is it like what needs to shift? Do I need help with this? And I think that's where, like, even coaching ourselves through some of that to get curious as opposed to just continuing to do what we've done.
Yeah.
Because maybe it was successful, but now there's no joy in it. Or maybe it's not successful. And it's like, well, do you still keep doing it? Or do you look at something different to improve it? Or, it's the curiosity around it without feeling like defeated or taking it like personally. That's the sweet spot too.
And I think some of it can maybe even be habitual, right? Like,
Yes.
this is how
Yes.
I've always worked. So this is how I'll approach my writing too. And then it's like, wait a minute. I
Exactly.
I think what you said about process and just being in that, like I have the sense that uh when we're outcome oriented, we're not likely on the right path.
Mm.
And when we're process oriented, when it's not about what we're achieving, and of course, everybody wants to achieve enough money to live, and there's these certain things
Yes.
that we need. Um, but I feel like in terms of what the creativity needs and what
Mhm.
our souls are asking for, it's like the best things tend to happen when we're in that flow and we're not thinking about, like you said before, how it's going to be perceived or, you know, how we're going to be judged or what it's going to get for us. It's just, um, it's like this collaboration with this creative energy that we're saying yes to. And I think we can call it creative energy, but it's also that yes to our own soul.
Yes. And to know to listen again, because that's a different listening than to that inner voice sometimes. Like, I think creativity arrives with a different feel, with a different whisper. Like, do you feel that?
I
Like,
do. I do.
yeah. And it's like, it's knowing the difference. It's knowing when, again, my legs are so graceful, but it's that feeling of the whisper to know that this needs to come into the world and it's arrived. And I think Elizabeth Gilbert talks about that, where in her big magic book, where it's like the idea comes in and the universe brings it to you, and like, will you say yes?
Yeah.
Like, will you say yes? Because it's been gifted to you. And it's like, are you the one to birth it and bring it into the world? Versus letting the voices, come in and interrupt. But yes, so all the things that you're saying that, we need to live and we need to have what we need to have. But how do we honor our creativity? How do we let that be here too? Because for me, the more that I turned away from that, the more it dimmed. And then to the point where it wasn't even coming in at all. But then it's like, oh, so sad. Like,
Yeah.
that just, uh, so like making sure that we do allow ourselves the space to listen. Yeah.
Well, Christine, there's a couple more things I'd like to do in our conversation. And
Sure.
one is I know you brought some writing of your own to share, which I think would be a real gift for everyone to hear. And is really generous of you to be willing to share with us. So I would love to hear that. And then the second thing is just at and we can do either one first. I'm open to whatever you'd like to share first. The other one is just for people to know how they can connect with you. I'm sure there's going to be people who would love to learn more about, coaching with you. And I think that you're really brilliant at guiding people through this process of getting in touch with that soul calling and making space to listen. So I'd love for people to learn how they can get in touch too.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Well, if anyone's interested in connecting with me, they can reach me at christine.francoeur@shadowlightglobal.com. And I'm not sure, is there somewhere in the show
Yeah.
notes you
I
can?
will link it.
Oh,
I will
okay.
link it.
Yeah, that would be great. And I would like, if anyone who's interested in actually coaching with me, because I'm right now building my hours to certification, I have like an extremely reduced hourly rate, which makes it really accessible. So just know if any of your listeners want to reach out to me, that I will offer the same to them, that they can actually have a really great rate to spend some time with me and discover that for themselves. So if that's of interest, please reach out.
That's lovely. Thank you, Christine. You're so generous spirit.
So I will bring up a piece of writing. So this was the piece that I mentioned earlier, where it was, yeah, I think we had 10, 12 minutes to do this. And it was like a prompt. I didn't write down the prompt, but it was through the Omega Institute with Cheryl Strait, which she's such a brilliant writer. So that's to me like spending time with writers who share like their wisdom and their knowledge is like it just reawakens that for me. And so this was one of those pieces from that day. And she does not mince her great approach. So it's like, okay, we're going where are we?
I've got my Kleenex ready now. Let's see.
Yeah. So here's one of those. So I opened my eyes, looking around the unfamiliar room and the crusty floral bedspread beneath me. Loud voices mingling with laughter and pounding music snaked their way up the stairs, winding into the master bedroom, busting into my hiding spot. This sleep held no rest as the room continued to spin and sway. I was uncertain how long I'd been asleep. Polite sips had turned into deep gulps from red solo cups that were filled too many times to remember. Their tasty invitation to dance and sing with abandon brought such relief. Yet that welcome friendship, as always, was only temporary. My joy melted to a slump of collapse as I found a steady bed ready to catch me. The restless churn in my stomach brought me round again as I longed to be back in the surf of unknown death found only in sleep. I was here, yet so far from the chaos that pulsed below me. Solid thumping steps. Solid thumping steps brought shared laughter that stopped at the door. I let my eyes close and my body still. Both of them were in the room now, continuing to laugh at a level that only alcohol could disguise as quiet. The hallway light pierced around them as I froze in their long shadows resting on top of me. I think she's asleep. Looks like someone had too many. I'll get her a blanket. The blanket slides over me in the weakest attempt to offer warmth. Is she awake? Did she get sick? Shh, don't wake her up. I don't know. Who cares? I need another drink. The light dims through my closed eyes as his shadow blocks the light for the briefest second. Okay, man, I'll be right down. I'm going to use the John. I feel him above me, an unwelcome hand reaching toward me. Stubby fingers arrive on my cheek, drawing sickening circles over and over. Penetrating the space between us is the dark, dense odor of rum. His lips land hard with the weight of his head pushing into me. He lifts up and scans my body, the sleeping me. He believes his want is hidden in the safety of my unconsciousness. Through the unyielding beat of a steady drum, the tinkle of my best friend's laughter reaches us. Filling the space above me, he drains away all that remains in his glass. The shadows and I watch as he dances slowly forward.
Beautifully written, Christine. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me share.
It's beautifully written. And in 10 minutes,
10 minutes.
amazing.
Just
Amazing.
minutes to sit and create and get the story out.
I love how you can create such an incredibly vivid world with your words.
It's always feels like just this like beautiful escape. Like, when you sink into like such a good book and you're away in another world, it's like the same for when I write. It's just sinking into the unknown world to see who's there waiting.
Yeah,
Yeah, what they have to say. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's so beautiful. So beautiful.
Thanks
Yeah.
for
I hope you do lots and lots of writing.
I plan to. I plan to. It's like that has planted the seeds of the joy that I feel when I write that. And I can feel the voices coming in again and wanting to be heard. So,
Amazing.
Mm.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to hearing more. I would like to read the follow-up writing that comes.
Okay. I will
Yeah.
share. I will share.
Thank you for being here, Christine.
Lisa, thank you for having me. I love our conversation so much. I feel like so much is waiting to be shared, and you bring such wisdom and understanding with what comes in the conversation, and how you weave it together is just your gift. You're so good.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm so grateful to get to talk to you. And I just feel like it's just the depth that you bring. It was nice to, if I could offer something like that back, I'm grateful.
Always do. Always
Yeah. So thank you. And I'm really excited to share this conversation.
do. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for listening to the Intentional Creator Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend who may be looking for exactly this message today, and leave a review. Are you ready to step into your creative calling and make the positive impact that you're meant to? Visit the intentionalcreatorpodcast.com to learn more about how I can support your journey and to stay up to date with all of the episodes for this podcast. I'd love to connect with you there.